Welcome back, Daisy Cakes, to part 7 of my alphabetical list of top 100 science fiction authors. I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. This is a list of top 100 science fiction authors that I've read. Me. So I know there are a lot of great science fiction authors out there, but either I've not read them, or I haven't read enough of them, or conceivably, I've forgotten because, let's face it, I'm old. Okay, let's get started. Tamsyn Muir is a New Zealand science fiction author born in 1985 who came out strong, and I mean like gangbusters, in 2019 with Gideon the Ninth. Now, I know that she published some award-winning short stories as early as 2013, but Gideon was her novel debut. And boy, did it get some praise. It was shortlisted for the Hugo, Nebula, and World Fantasy Award. It was on a ton of best books of 2019, including NPR, Vox, and the New York Public Library. Everybody, including me, was thrilled with the tagline, "Lesbian Necromancers in Space." It is the first in a series called The Locked Tomb, which is definitely a genre smash with science fiction, fantasy, horror, and mystery. The star system of Dominicus is run by the Emperor, an immortal necromancer who is super powerful and worshipped like a god. The Emperor is served by representatives of the 9 planets called lectors, each ruled by a house of necromancy, every house practicing their own speciality of necromancy. The first house is the house of the Emperor on the planet Canaan, and all the houses are called to send a representative to possibly become a new lector. One of the emperor's chosen. Each representative must have a cavalier, or bodyguard, on the 9th house, whose only purpose seems to be to guard this locked tomb. A powerful necromancer named Harrowhawk is chosen, and her cavalier is a woman warrior named Gideon. The two absolutely hate each other, but they arrive on the planet, which seems like it's almost uninhabited, and are dumped into this decaying mansion with the representatives of the other houses. There are mysteries to uncover, and everything turns deadly. The story is told from the first-person point of view of Gideon, and I think it is one of the best character voices I've ever read. She is crude, funny, so funny, and I dare you not to fall in love with Gideon, which is one of the reasons why I was disappointed with the next book in the series, Harrow the Ninth, published in 2020, because we no longer had that wonderful voice of Gideon, and I did not really like Harrow. But also, not only do I think the writing is literary, but in Harrow, I think it is experimental in that Tamsyn Muir seems to play around a lot with breaking conventions, which I respect, but I felt the plot, which was really convoluted to begin with, just became really difficult to follow. But the next book in the series, published in 2022, Nona the Ninth, had me back. It was told from the point of view of apparently a child. I found Nona delightful. She reminded me of Flavia de Luce, another of my favorite child characters written for adults. And of course, I cannot wait to read the 4th book, Alecto the Ninth. When does it come out? Is it out already? I think it'll be out soon. Now we turn to one of the biggest names in science fiction, Larry Niven. Born in 1938, he is still active, I believe, at the age of 86. He has been extremely prolific, won all the awards, and was named a Grandmaster by the Science Fiction Writers Association. Niven was one of my favorite science fiction writers during high school, mainly because I found Ringworld, published in 1970, in the school library. I absolutely loved all of his books that I read set in the known space, and his collaborations with Jerry Pournelle, like Mote in God's Eye, Lucifer's Hammer, those were amazing. And I loved his recent Fleet of Worlds series written in collaboration with Edward Lerner about one of his most incredible alien creations, the Puppeteers. But if you only read one Niven novel, it has got to be the one I started with, Ringworld, which won the Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Awards. It is about a crew gathered together by an alien named Nessus, who is a puppeteer. Puppeteers are a race of abject cowards who are kind of bovine with two heads. Nessus recruits two humans, an Earthman, Louis Wu, who is hundreds of years old thanks to longevity drugs, and Tila Brown, a very lucky woman. Another member of the crew is Speaker to Animals, an alien who is known as a Kazin, who evolved from giant feline predators. Their mission is to investigate an object the puppeteers discovered in space known as the Ringworld. It is an artificial band about 1 million miles wide that circles the sun. The inside of the band is habitable and, of course, huge. A smaller band of opaque and non-opaque squares rotate to mimic day and night on Ringworld. There are a lot of mysteries to uncover, like who are the people that live on Ringworld, and why was Ringworld abandoned by its creators? Okay, I have to include at least one children's book. The writer is Robert C. O'Brien, born in 1918 and died in 1973 at the young age of 55. He wrote only a handful of children's science fiction books, but one was one of my favorites growing up, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, published in 1971, just 2 years before O'Brien died. But the book went on to win the Newbery and became a very successful animated movie called The Secret of Nim. The story is told from the point of view of animals, which is not my usual go-to, even in children's books, but there are always exceptions, and this is a big exception. It's about a widowed mouse named Mrs. Frisby, whose son is ill and has to be moved. She is eventually led to seek help from a community of super-intelligent rats, also known as the Rats of Nim, who apparently were good friends with Mrs. Frisby's husband. NIM, by the way, stands for National Institute of Mental Health, and if you put two and two together and think that NIM was conducting experiments on mice and rats, you can guess where the story is heading. It's a shame O'Brien passed away so young, but his daughter, Jane Leslie Conley, carried on her father's legacy, became a children's writer, and wrote two well-received sequels, Rasco and the Rats of Nim, published in 1986, and Artie, Margaret, and the Rats of Nim, published in 1990. We have to put on our serious hat for the next author because it is George Orwell. Orwell was born in 1903 and died of tuberculosis in 1950 at the super young age of 46. That's really young. I was a big fan when I found him during high school, and I read a lot of his works, including his first book, Down and Out in Paris and London. If you're going to restaurants, by the way, don't read this book. His two most famous novels are Animal Farm, published in 1945, which, like Mrs. Frisby, is from the point of view of animals, but it's really a satire and allegory about how the good intentions of communism can give rise to brutal dictatorships. It's basically about the Soviet Union. But, of course, his most famous novel is 1984, published in 1949. This is one of those stories that defined the subgenre of dystopian novels. And it is brutal to read. There's no happy endings here. It also turned Orwell's name into an adjective. When someone says Orwellian future, we know they mean a dystopian future where the government, Big Brother, controls everything, even how you think, even changing history and the meaning of words to shape the thoughts of the citizens. That's what the main character, Winston Smith, tries to push against. But the brutality and machinery of the government stamp him down. The year 1984 has come and gone, but what's the novel 1984 prescient? Ed Park is a Korean-American writer born in 1970 in Buffalo, New York. One of my livestream followers, hi Cappuccino, introduced me to his book, Same Bed, Different Dreams, published in 2023. The book was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, so yeah, it is safe to assume it is literary, but it is also experimental. Like I said about Tamsyn Muir's second book, experimental means the author plays around with the plot and often breaks normal storytelling conventions. It can be very exciting, but it can also be very hard to read. So I will tell you right off that I almost DNF'd this book, at least at the beginning, because I got frustrated with how it was split between different storylines and timelines that didn't seem to connect. But I am so glad I stuck with it because it eventually pays off. And if you can get through, I don't know, the first 20, 30% of the novel, it does pick up and make more sense. It's about, gosh, what is it about? It's about the Provisional Korean Government, which was created after Japan occupied Korea in 1919. There is so much detailed history in this that I didn't know about Korea. And there's this also wild secret history that may or may not be true. So it's really hard to distinguish between what is and isn't. And it has a bunch of cultural references from MASH to K-pop. I actually recommend reading this on a Kindle or an ebook where you can highlight the words or names and call up a Wikipedia entry because I found myself doing that a lot. If you are willing to take the journey, it is well worth the trip. Steve Perry was born in 1947. He didn't just write books, but he wrote for television and is still writing today at the age of 77. He's been fairly prolific, writing many IP works like for Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire, published in 1996, or Aliens, Aliens Earthhive, published in 1992, or Aliens vs. Predator, like Prey, published in 1994. Like Robert Jordan, he wrote a lot of Conan novels in the 80s, starting with Conan the Fearless in 1986. But what I know him for is the Matador series, which started with The Man Who Never Missed, published in 1985. It's about a man named Emil Kadaji, who's sort of this, I don't know, Han Solo type rogue who joins the Matadors, the rebellion against the Confed Space Empire. Emil deserted the Empire's military and becomes a legend, shooting over 2,000 soldiers and never missing, making him feared by the Empire. This is super popcorn, candy, James Bond type science fiction that is short, punchy, and fast to read. My favorite of the series is The Albino Knife, published in 1991, about Emil's daughter, Veet, who is just as deadly. If you like space opera and military sci-fi, you can't go wrong with the Matador series. Let's go back to the golden age of science fiction with Frederick Pohl. Pohl was born in 1919 and died in 2013 at the age of 93. He first published in 1937 with a poem called Elegy to a Dead Satellite, Luna. He was named Grandmaster by the Science Fiction Writers Association in 1993 and has won a total of 4 Hugos and 3 Nebulas. Now, the novel I recommend, and probably his most famous work, was published late in his career when he was in his late 50s. That's Gateway, published in 1977. The story is from the point of view of a man named Broadhead, who is basically talking to his AI-generated psychologist named Siegfried von Schrink. And he's relating events through psychoanalysis to Siegfried in order to break through a memory block. Broadhead is one of the lucky few who won a lottery and uses the money to see whether piloting an alien spaceship will kill him or not. Let me explain. There was an alien race called the Heechee who lived aeons ago and are now extinct, but they left behind some high-tech ships surrounding this asteroid they're calling Gateway. And there's about 1,000 alien ships that no one really knows where they go or how to control it. The Gateway Corporation oversees test runs on these ships to see if they lead to either star systems with really valuable Heechee artifacts or to certain death. Who knows? You could die horribly or become rich beyond imagination or something in between. Broadhead becomes one of these test pilots and eventually becomes part of a crew that ends up going to a black hole. This book really amazed me when I first read it in the 70s. It definitely can be read as a standalone. I'm pretty sure it was written as a standalone, but Pohl followed up with 5 sequels, and I recommend the next 2, where you can find out more about the Heechee, Beyond the Blue Event Horizon, published in 1980, and Heechee Rendezvous, published in 1984. But again, you can read Gateway as a standalone. I already mentioned this next author, Jerry Pournelle, born in 1933 and died in 2017 at the age of 84. Now, I selected Pournelle maybe as a way to talk more about Larry Niven, but Pournelle has written some really good, hard, military science fiction. I actually was going to talk about The Mercenary, this book, but after looking it up, it apparently doesn't exist anymore. It's now part of The Prince, which is the complete saga of Falkenberg's Legion. But really my recommendation is his collaborations with Larry Niven. All of them are great, especially Lucifer's Hammer, published in 1977, which is a post-apocalyptic novel about an asteroid named Lucifer's Hammer hitting the Earth. And Inferno, published in 1976, which is this weird fantasy about hell based on Dante's Inferno, about an agnostic science fiction writer who dies trying to entertain his fans and ends up in Dante's Inferno. But my favorite has got to be The Mote in God's Eye, published in 1974, set in Pournelle's universe where the United States and Soviet Union have combined into a world government. It's about a starship sent to investigate the Mote, the name of a yellow star that religious fanatics called the Mote in God's Eye. There, they come into first contact with a really interesting alien race that they call the Moties. This is such a good book. Heinlein called it the finest science fiction novel he ever read. It is a science fiction classic that everyone that I know who's read it has loved it. Let's talk about Mike Resnick, born in 1942 and died in 2020 at the age of 77. I'm always surprised that more people haven't heard of Resnick, but he's written more than 70 novels and 25 collections. He's also won 5 Hugo Awards and a Nebula. One of his most famous novels is Santiago, published in 1986 about a galactic bounty hunter looking for the legendary criminal Santiago, which highlights the humor in Resnick's work. But what I want to recommend is his Oracle trilogy, which starts with Soothsayer, published in 1991, about Penelope Bailey, a girl born who can foresee the future, and everyone in the galaxy either wants to exploit her or kill her. Penelope is saved by a woman called Mouse, who is a cynical thief. You should read the whole trilogy, which shouldn't take too long because the books are pretty short. Each book is a different stage of Penelope's life. Soothsayer is Penelope as a young girl. Then Oracle, published in 1992, is Penelope as a young woman. Finally, Prophet, published in 1993, is Penelope when she is mature. I want everyone to read this series. It is top drawer science fiction. Finally, we conclude this group of 10 with Kim Stanley Robinson. Robinson was born in 1952 and is still active today at the age of 72. He received a doctorate in English literature in 1982 from the University of California, San Diego, and his thesis was The Novels of Philip K. Dick. He's won many awards, including the Hugo and Nebula. His first novel was The Wild Shore, published in 1984, the first in a trilogy about possible futures of California, also known as the Three Californias trilogy. But what Robinson is well known for is his climate fiction, also associated with Solarpunk, with the publication of Red Mars, published in 1992, about the colonization of Mars. Green Mars, published in 1993, focuses on the terraforming of Mars. And finally, Blue Mars, published in 1996, about what happens after Mars has been successfully terraformed. The Mars trilogy has become a classic science fiction Solarpunk trilogy that you should definitely check out. That ends the 7th installment of my top 100 science fiction writers. Were any of these your favorites? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm doing a list of top 100 fantasy authors, so check that one out too. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.